Hello, and welcome to the Secular Nation Podcast, brought to you by the Atheist Alliance of America. I'm your host, Tim Brannon, and with me is Michael X, our co-host and technical director.
Hi, I hope you like my pseudonym. Back to you, Tim.
Earlier this week, we spoke with HerbSilverman, author of Candidate Without a Prayer, an autobiography of a Jewish atheist in the Bible Belt. Herb is the president of the Secular Coalition of America and the one-time gubernatorial candidate of South Carolina.
And before we get to it, as technical director, I should probably apologize for any dropouts that occurred during the interview. But I'm sure you'll enjoy it as much as we did.
Okay, so this is Tim Brannon. I'm here with my co-host, Michael X, and we are with HerbSilverman, author of the book Candidate Without a Prayer, an autobiography of a Jewish atheist in the Bible Belt. Hello, Herb.
Hello, I'm happy to be here.
That's great. We're happy to have you here. I've read this book, and I loved it. Every moment of it. Maybe not every moment, but, I laughed heartily many times, and I found it extremely interesting.
Well, I'm happy to hear that.
Actually, it begins with a foreword by Richard Dawkins, which I found great. Although I have to admit, though, it was a bit spoilerific, if you don't mind me saying so. He sort of prefaces a lot of your jokes in the book, which, oh, he's going to say this, and it's so great.
Well, I was really pleased that he wrote such a flattering foreword to the book. And even if he spoiled some of my lines, I think I got enough other stuff in there.
So you were raised in Philadelphia, which is great because we're South Jersey boys. We consider you a local, I guess.
Oh yeah, my main trips when I was young was a trip to Atlantic City. That's about as far as I ever got out of Philadelphia till I went to graduate school.
Did you ever hear anything of the Jersey Devil while you were out here? This is kind of the local domain.
No, I did hear a lot of God talk when I was a child, but we never heard much about devils there. But I believe equally in Satan and God.
Of course.
In the extended interview, we discuss his youthful experiences with displaced persons from the Holocaust. The conversation then turned to cultural Judaism.
Jews, I think they are very grounded in their culture and heritage, but it seems not so much in the actual theology. Would you say that's accurate?
Oh, very much so, that you do not have to believe in God to be a Jew. And I think that's somewhat unique in the so-called monotheistic religions, that it was much more cultural. And after I became an atheist, I felt like I'm still Jewish, but my Jewish roots felt strongest when I saw anti-Semitism around. So my Judaism was really anti-Semitism.
I've always been intrigued by the idea that there's no similar concept in Christianity for the non-observant Jew, that it would almost be helpful to have a concept of the non-observant Christian as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess what I like about Judaism is that we're supposed to get educated, read all we can about a lot of things, and reading the Bible, discussing the Bible, and reading other books about the Bible, that helped turn me into an atheist.
The conversation then turned to the title of Dr. Silverman's book.
The actual title, though, is that's in reference to your gubernatorial candidacy, which I like that part of the book, though. It is a very small part of the book.
Since it was an autobiography, it's still probably the most important part of the book. And I think, by the way, initially my book was more than twice as long as it was. The hardest part for me was not just writing it, it's cutting out other parts that I enjoyed writing. But, I'm trying to think of the reader, what's most important to them. And I think I gave a reasonable flavor of why I ran and some of the experiences I had while running. For those who don't know, the reason I became a candidate for governor of South Carolina, even though I was a liberal Yankee Jewish atheist with 4 strikes against me, was that a colleague at the College of Charleston, where I was teaching, pointed out that our Constitution in South Carolina prohibited atheists from becoming a governor. So then I went to the ACLU to see how that obviously unconstitutional provision could be changed. And a lawyer there told me that someone would have to mount a legal challenge by running for governor. And he asked me if I'd be willing to be that candidate. After much thought, I agreed. A lot of the stories in the book are about what would happen to me, the kind of comments I would get when I was running for governor, along with some media appearances when I was running for governor, and how that really did change my life from kind of a mild-mannered mathematician to becoming part of the community and being an accidental atheist activist. Because prior to that, I was an apathetic atheist, as I think most atheists are. And when I saw this as a civil rights issue, I got engaged in the movement, and now I'm hoping that more atheists come out of the closet. And that's the best way to change views of atheists, much like it worked with the LGBT movement.
Now, I won't spoil the actual results of that election, although obviously you aren't the governor of South Carolina.
Yeah, but I'll spoil it. I lost the election.
Oh, I was going to say, I haven't been calling you governor during this call.
But I did have a constitutional victory eventually in the South Carolina Supreme Court. And atheists now are allowed to hold public office in South Carolina.
Yeah, was that because you were actually able to get a notary public license?
Yeah, after that I found out that I was ineligible for any public office, so I ran for notary public and eventually won in the Supreme Court when the governor still denied me even becoming a notary public, because he knew that then our South Carolina Constitution would acknowledge that it's wrong in denying me the right for public office, because our U.S. Constitution says no religious tests for public office.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that took 7 years?
Oh, yeah. They kept delaying and having one appeal after the other. The wheels of justice move very slowly in South Carolina. As far as I know, I'm the only person in the history of South Carolina to be denied a notary public.
I liked the part in the book where you actually had to go to the office to get the collect your license, and you're sort of like woohoo, and everyone else is sort of like notary. Yeah. Like my wife was taking pictures of me getting the notary certificate from the county clerk and holding the notary above my head. And meanwhile, others in the county clerk's office had no idea what was going on. So, I don't know your definition of a loser, but they thought that, gee, the high point of this guy's life is notary. Yeah.
So we had fun with that.
Now, also in the book, you sort of go over a number of your debates. Among them was the infamous William Lane Craig.
Right.
Would you like to talk about that for a while?
Yeah, he is well known in debating circles as supposedly the top Christian apologist in debates. And we were talking about two different things during the debate. because I said, first of all, I said, with over 7,000 gods that people believe in, we agree on well over 99% of God beliefs. He's an atheist with respect to all but one, and I just don't make that one exception. But in his arguments, he expected me to prove that there are no gods. And I said, I just don't have evidence, and I go by evidence. Just like I don't have, I could say that the world was created 20 minutes ago, and some deity gave us false memories, and you couldn't disprove that, but you don't believe it. If I were to say something like that, I would have to provide evidence. So I asked him for evidence for his beliefs, and I think I refuted all evidence that he gave for his beliefs. But, when one thing I remember mentioning to him is, how different is it to be and this is something I used to think of as a mathematician, how different is best person in hell compared to the worst person in heaven? That seems like it would be a pretty fine distinction. But for him, he has the answer that it doesn't matter what kind of works you do. It just matters that you have a belief that Jesus is the Son of God, and you have to have faith in that. Which, in my mind, if that were true, it would be a pretty nasty God that had such an ego. I even made an analogy with my teaching. I teach mathematics. If a student said, hey, I think you're a great teacher, even though I didn't learn anything, they're still going to fail the course. And even if they said, I think you were a horrible teacher, but I studied hard and I got A's in my exams, and I give the student an A because I think your works count more than your beliefs. And I would hope that if there were a loving God, he would or she would have similar views.
One of the things I know biologists tend not to want to debate with creationists because they feel it's kind of a losing battle. Not in the rhetorical sense, but not in the factual sense. Do you feel though it was a learning experience to see him kind of duck and weave a bit, do you feel it's a worthwhile effort?
Yes, but not because of the debaters. I don't think I learned a lot from what William Lane Craig said, and I expect he's heard a lot of the arguments I've given. And the only reason he might want to learn from me or I from him is if we hear arguments we hadn't heard, and we might want to refine our debates. But to me, when I debate a fundamentalist, it's not my trying to change that fundamentalist minister. It's to talk to the audience about, first, what an atheist is, and give arguments they hadn't heard before. Because a lot of the people in the audience have only heard about atheism from their ministers or about evolution from their ministers. So I just want to get people in the audience thinking in ways that they haven't before. But I'm hoping that some open-minded Christians will learn something new and appreciate our viewpoints.
So advantage atheists in that sense.
Yeah, it's the sort of thing that I would not want to say debate a Holocaust denier.
True.
Give them a forum because our public acknowledges that there was a Holocaust, except for some really fringe people. So I to give them the stage. But unfortunately, in our culture, especially in South Carolina, it's atheists who are viewed as the fringe group. So I am open to a forum anywhere, if I'm challenged by a fundamentalist Christian or any other kind of Christian for that matter, because I'd like to have us spread the message of what atheists are like.
You have a lot of very interesting, very poignant quotes throughout your book. I think one of the things Dawkins says of just the idea of disagreeing without being disagreeable. But there's one that I really latched onto and I like was this one. Christians have the same unifying word but fight over theology. Secularists have the same unifying theology but fight over words. That, to me, kind of crystallizes this whole sort of internal struggle between, atheists and agnostics and humanists.
Right. Now, I did also add that at least our wars are only verbal.
Yes, indeed.
And the frustration I had is, once I got engaged in South Carolina with atheism, I started to learn about lots of other national groups like the Atheist Alliance of America, American Atheists, American Humanist Association, Council for Secular Humanism, etc.
The People's Front of Judea.
Yeah. And I liked what all of them were saying, and I joined them all. But it was frustrating to me to see that each was doing its own thing without regard to other groups. And when they would talk about other groups, they would talk about what they were called, things like that. Like, humanists would say atheists have a bad reputation, so we want to call ourselves humanists because we do good as well as not believing in God. Mm-hmm. And atheists would call humanists just gutless atheists. And, there might be some truth both ways. That atheist has a negative connotation with the general public, so people would rather call themselves humanists. On the other hand, the Pope calls himself a humanist too. So it's not as well defined. But my view is let's have all of the various groups cooperate and let each person call themselves what they want. If they want to call themselves an atheist, a humanist, secular humanist, a bright, anything else, because we agree with well over 95% of the issues, and we shouldn't spend so much time just fighting over words. So that's when I helped to form the Secular Coalition for America, which now has 11 national non-theistic organizations, and we also lobby in D.C., and we're trying to make a difference both politically and culturally. So I'm really pleased that a lot of these organizations are now cooperating in ways that they hadn't in the past.
What are your current activities or current projects that you're working on, either or with the Secular Coalition?
Well, with the Secular Coalition, we're, in addition to having the National Secular Coalition, we're in the process of organizing 50 state secular coalitions so that politicians, both locally, statewide, and nationally, will hear from us. We're trying to make a difference. We're even trying to get a voice in both the Republican and Democratic parties. Just like there's a log cabin Republicans for the LGBTs, there should be secular groups in both the Democrat and Republican parties. So, some people think this is overly optimistic, but through the Secular Coalition, we held a contest, and we got the first person in the history of Congress to become an open atheist, to acknowledge it, and that's Pete Stark, a Democrat from California. We're hoping to have others, and even some Republicans. We already know that there are at least 28 who are in the closet, and we're not going to be outing any members of Congress, but we know if we can get a Republican to come out of the closet, then several Democrats also will.
Since this is called the Secular Nation Podcast, there's kind of a general question I'd like to ask, which is, I guess the best way to put it is, are we now or have we ever been a secular nation? And if not, how do we become one?
Well, officially, we are a secular nation. our Constitution starts with "we the people," not "thou the deity." And I've even had some fun locally when I wrote an op-ed in our paper offering $1,000 to anyone who can find God or Jesus in our Constitution, because so many people thought we were a Christian nation, but we are a secular nation. Religion is only mentioned in the Constitution as there shall be no religious test, and we have freedom of religion. It does not in any way promote religion. So I'm comfortable saying we're a secular nation, just like I'm comfortable saying that Barack Obama was born in this country. But there are people who think we're a Christian nation, just like there are people who think Barack Obama was born in Kenya. I just say, give me evidence. It's like saying the reason we're not a secular nation, we're a Christian nation, is because the majority of people are Christians. Well, that's true, but the majority of people in this country are also women. That doesn't make us a female nation. If women were the only ones who voted, I think we'd probably have better representatives in Congress.
Yeah, that might actually be a good thing. Well, it's funny you mentioned the lack of mention of God or Jesus in the Constitution. We mentioned earlier the God of the gaps. Maybe God and Jesus were in the spaces between the words.
Well, actually, in debates, that's what people said. That
oh, you're kidding.
It was somehow implicit, or they'll use in the year of our Lord in a document that was signed, but that was just the way. It's kind of like saying sincerely today, that it really didn't mean anything. So people who try to find God in the Constitution have a really difficult time of it.
Yeah, and one of the things people try to say, we were founded as a Christian nation as if that's special. When, I mean, what about every other nation in the West? Were they not? They were very specifically founded as a Christian nation.
Our founders saw what was happening in some of these European countries that were Christian in nature, and they wanted us to not have those religious battles that others had, and that's why we were the first country to be founded as a secular nation. And that's what when I say I'm proud to be an American, that's what I would focus on. There's lots, of course, I don't like about what's happening in the United States, but our founding as a secular nation was a proud moment for people in this country today.
Tim brought up the fact that when the Constitution was founded, an American could be of any religion and vote, as long as they were white and male.
But you could be a white male, atheist, Jew, whatever, technically, and be able to vote.
Yeah, well, I mean, the founders had to come up with a Constitution that would be supported by all states. And because of places like South Carolina, they couldn't get through a non-slavery clause, or some southern states would bolt. So they had to make political compromises, and they were also at least recognizing that they were flawed people, which is why we have provisions to make constitutional amendments, because they knew later generations would improve on the original Constitution. Unfortunately, the people of the Bible are not allowed to make amendments to the Bible. Otherwise, we would have probably a much better book today if we took out some of the horrendous parts of the Bible that some people believe literally.
Yeah.
Hasta la vista, Leviticus.
Well, I like what Thomas Jefferson did when he wrote his own Bible, taking out the parts that made no sense for him, including the supernatural. And what remained, he called diamonds in a dunghill.
It's fun to watch the
diamonds in. Yeah, there are some diamonds in the Bible, things that make sense to me that I think we should keep, that are also part of most religions anyhow, and part of atheism and humanism. And if we focus on what's good for our fellow human beings and how we should treat them instead of making up stuff that a God wants you to do, I think we'd all be better off. And those are the diamonds left from what Jefferson referred to as the dunghill, in both the Old and New Testaments, by the way.
Indeed.
All right, well, I think we should sort of wrap it up. Actually, just have a couple, incidental questions. Now, your name, HerbSilverman, that's no relation to David Silverman or Sarah Silverman.
Well, we are all related by Lucy.
Good point.
But as far as I know, there are no more immediate relations.
Yeah, I don't know. It's something about Silverman just screams Jewish atheist, apparently.
Well, it's not that much of a coincidence, because I think next to Unitarians, there are more atheists within Judaism than any other religion. Mm-hmm. And that's why I'm proud to be a Jew, of sorts. And in fact, one of our member organizations for the Secular Coalition is the Society for Humanistic Judaism. And that was founded by Sherwin Wine, a rabbi who is also an atheist. And members of that organization are Jewish atheists.
Mm-hmm. All right. Mike, you mentioned a question you want to ask him, sort of off subject, but yeah.
Oh, yes. Well, now that I presume you've had access to more than the first two books of the encyclopedia, would you still say that Adams is your favorite president?
No, and that's a reference to when I was young. We were pretty poor, and we would get encyclopedias from a supermarket if you bought enough stuff, and we got just the A and B parts. So when I would write book reports, I would just have, I would want to look for something starting with an A or a B. And when it came to presidents, I had John Adams was my favorite, because without the Adams family, it would be people like James Buchanan. And, and, I didn't have much of a choice. But since then, I've read more than A and B words, and I have a lot of presidents I prefer to John Adams. One of which, you mentioned intellectual Republicans. I liked Abraham Lincoln, not just for his views about slavery, but on his religious views. He once said, when I do good, I feel good. When I do bad, I feel bad. That is my religion. And that's the kind of religion I like.
I just realized too that if atheist was in with the A's, maybe that's why he became an atheist rather than a Zoroastrian.
Well, actually, I became an atheist before I even heard the word atheist growing up. I knew that, I was trying to become logical when I was interested in mathematics, and that quickly had me give up God. But it wasn't until I read Bertrand Russell's Why I Am Not a Christian, and I saw he wasn't as many things as I wasn't, and I learned about atheism, and I said, hey, that's me, and I'm not alone in my thinking, and that makes me feel good.
Yeah, I think that sort of goes back to the whole, fighting over words but agreeing on theology of, when I became an atheist, none of my beliefs changed, my definition of atheism changed.
Yeah, I had called myself an agnostic for a while, because as a mathematician, I thought that to be an atheist, you had to be able to prove that there's no God. And I couldn't give a mathematical proof. And then I heard another definition, that an atheist is without a belief in any gods. Mm-hmm. And that certainly was me. So I switched from being an agnostic to an atheist. But my beliefs really didn't change. I just used a different word. And I think we should be comfortable with people who use different words, whose theology is the same. I even coined the word functional atheist, those who act as if there's no God. So you can have people who might even have some kind of spirituality or amorphous belief, but as long as it doesn't affect their behavior, as far as I'm concerned, they're one of us.
All right. Well, I think that wraps it up, unless there's anything you want to add, Mike, or...
No, this is terrific.
All right.
I appreciate your being with us.
Thanks very much, and I hope people will consider taking a look at my book, Candidate Without a Prayer. There's an e-book and a hardcover book, and as you mentioned, an audio version. And it can also be found on Amazon or Barnes & Noble.
Herb Silverman can be seen at this weekend's Ascent of Atheism conference in Denver, Colorado, held by the Atheist Alliance of America, along with other speakers including Vic Stenger, P.Z. Myers, Matt Dillahunty, Jessica Alquist, Greta Christina, Aaron Ra, Alliance President Nick Lee, Seth Andrews, and many more. The uncut version of this interview is available to all AAA members on our website. If you are not a member and would like to be, you may do so at atheistallianceamerica.org. Again, this is Tim Brannon along with my co-host Michael X for the Secular Nation podcast, signing off.